There's some animal guys out there, okay? Horrible guys. I'm not trying to say that those people don't exist. I realize they exist. They should be buried underneath the prison, okay? If I can admit that, ladies, can you at least admit that every ass kicking doesn't just fall out of the fucking sky?
You know, if you had at least 3 inches, at least, maybe I would want you. You know, maybe condoms would stay on, but, you know, I don't think you need condoms. You could probably just use kitty balloons, you know, those string ones to make...
Alright, Sistas fans, this is the video. I thought the last video about Danni, where I titled it, I don't feel bad or sorry for her, I thought that video would be the pinnacle of, yep, I know I'm going to get dragged. But no, on that video, about 24 minutes long, I've actually received overall positive responses. I mean, yeah, there are some people who just straight up said, yeah, you know, he deserved what he got. But keep in mind, that video was recorded several days ago. And then I posted it, I believe, I forgot the exact date. I know the day that Sisters aired, which was the 30th. I posted a lot of content at once. That video was posted on, I gotta double check. Give me 1 second. Yeah, the 30th itself. I really wish I could have got that video out sooner than I did. But like I said, Thanksgiving holiday kind of superseded everything else, and I gave myself like a 4-day break. So that video was a bit late. Keep in mind, that video was based on the events of episode 7. So everything that happened at the beginning of episode 8, this week's episode, you know, the follow-up from the spit in the face, continuing to call her out of her name, grabbing Danni, slamming her to the floor before like slapping her around a bit more, attempting to choke her before he didn't threaten to kill her. He straight up said, you're lucky I don't kill you. And, you know, next time I will, or, you know, there might be somebody else that like the next guy you pull, you know, this stun on will. And then he goes before Danni goes out there to follow him, leading to, you know, you want to hit me, huh? You going to hit me? You know, she kind of like tried to like, you know, slap and punch him from the back as he's walking away. But then he kind of like shoved her or pushed her to the ground. And then she grabbed like a blunt object. It was either like a bat or a pipe or a plank of wood. I couldn't tell what it was. I tried to freeze frame it. But since the object itself was pretty dark in color and it was dark outside when it happened, I couldn't really make out what it was, but I'm just going to call it like, you know, a pipe or something like that. So she begins to like wail on him at that point. Look, the moment that this disgusting piece of shit spit in her face, I said, move aside, Hayden, Karen, Gary. This just made Jonah the most hated character in the entire series. This was episode 99. And trust and believe, it took, you know, it's been a while. People have been debating Gary, Hayden, Karen, who's the most hated or annoying character on the show. This dude takes the cake. It wasn't even a slap for me. It wasn't the choking. When this man spit in her face, that's why I'm like, this piece of shit is the worst character ever. Just my opinion. Now, this video is going to be interesting because I think Twitter is where people hate what I say the most, but this video is going to go over all of my thoughts. But the title will be, did Danni go too far? Or I think Danni took it too far. Now, as big a piece of shit as Jonah was, I do not think that he deserved to die. That's just my opinion. I think the conversation would be different if he did go through with his threats of, I ought to kill you, or I'm not going to kill you. Or let's say if he continued to, let's say if Danni did manage to like grab the knife out of the, cause that's what it looked like, you know, after, she kind of jumped from the bed and rushed away. It looked like she was going to the kitchen drawer to get that knife, the same one she pulled out when Logan forced his way into her apartment. I think that's what she was going to do. But, had she had managed to like grab it or something like even more dramatic, like she managed to get the drawer open, but like Jonah grabbed her and like pulled her back, and then like the drawer like fell on the floor, and utensils went everywhere. And then in the midst of choking her, she like grabbed that knife and stabbed him. Yeah, that I would have been like, you know what? Yeah, because that was literally self-defense. I still would be saying though, relating to all the red flags she ignored, it led up to what happened, him murdering her. In the what if scenario of had Danni killed Jonah while he was still abusing her. But like Andy says in the trailer for next week, when you went outside and ran him over, that's when things get complicated. I showed the scene to my mom. She knows people, from, around, not this specific, well, basically in our county and whatnot, because she's well versed in news reports and all. Like, yeah, I know somebody on the job I worked with for over 20 years. She didn't go to jail for murdering her husband because he was an abuser and he was literally beating her in the kitchen. She was on the floor. Because this was a big news story when it happened. I think I was like I'm 31, but this was over 20 years ago. So I probably wasn't really, aware of it. But essentially, yeah, this guy was beating on his wife and she stabbed him in the kitchen while she was being beaten. She got off because it was self-defense. The difference here is that the threat had left the apartment. Again, Jonah is a piece of shit. He had left the apartment, and then Danni going after him was like the threats left, but now things are getting complicated because you went out there and followed him. Like, I was for, Danni bashing his ass with that blunt object, a pipe. My thing was, I was afraid for her because it's like, yo, Danni, let him go because you don't know what this fool got in his car. You just don't know. I mean, he might got a piece on him in his pocket. You just don't know. But, after she wailed on him and bust the windows out, I'm like, oh shit, she's pulling a Zatima. That's when she jumped in her car and threw it in reverse, rammed it into his car, and then that was the opening scene of the episode. So this, let me just say this much. I think that the conversation, to my knowledge, I don't think Mignon has posted anything after this last episode, but I will check real quick to see if she posted anything. I know that she did retweet a lot of people who were like, cheering for Danni, and they were like, yeah, there we go. Danni, she killed that guy because that was like for every victim of domestic violence, she did that for us. I think for me, it's a situation where I feel like, yeah, you can cheer, but at the same time, it's not something that should be mimicked. Obviously, yes, this is a TV show, but this is really affecting people who have been victims of domestic violence, hence why there are people who are emotional about it. And that's the whole thing with Tyler Perry writing. Not all, yes, it is over the top more often than not, but at the core, there are there's a message behind the madness. And I think that what I said in my last video, and I even said this on in the Facebook group and whatnot, last week when Mignon posted those two pictures with a huge caption on it regarding people saying, but to Danni's getting slapped. My problem with that is when you pretty much use the blanket statement of all domestic violence is wrong. And I'm not saying that putting hands on, well, keep your hands to yourself in general. I'm not trying to make this a, Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter debate. I'm saying that at the core, it's one of these situations where I think the Danni scenario, before, the spit in the face, before, the murder and everything, the conversation that needs to be had is for men, women, or whoever, you need to be careful who you allow in your personal space, who you bring home, who you meet online, who you hook up with, because you just don't know. And on top of that, be careful how you act and what you say. Let me put it this way. Because I'm saying that, I'm not dismissing, I'm not ignoring, I'm not denying that there are innocent victims out there. There are people who are picked off on the street, minding their own damn business. They're taken to like a back alley. They're shoved into a car. Hell, there are people who break into people's houses and, sexually assault them. I'm not ignoring that. But the thing that people need to realize is I'm talking about Danni. I'm not talking about the countless domestic violence situations. Now, I know I got heat for one of my tweets a couple days ago where I said the people who are cheering for Danni murdering Jonah. And actually, let me go ahead and pull up the tweet so I can read it word for word, because this video isn't to call out those who disagree with me, because trust and believe, a few weeks ago when the Zatima stands were really going at me on Twitter, this is kind of the same thing. I feel like the back half of Zatima as well as Sistas season 5, I feel like this is where I've received the most quote unquote hate from people online. Just so you know, this doesn't get to me, because most of the people saying shut the fuck up or whatever, these are people with barely any followers. It's just the ignorance that kills me. It's the people who refuse to think about what I said, as opposed to seeing it or reading it or hearing it as something that they don't like, and they automatically condemn me for it. So here's the tweet. People approving of Danni murdering Jonah because he called her a B word and hit her sound like the people who approve of Will Smith smacking Chris Rock because he said something about his wife that he didn't like. 34 comments, 10 retweets, and 29 likes. And I know a lot of people gave me flack for that. A lot of women were like, how dare you compare those two scenarios? It's you can't compare the Danni situation to the Chris Rock thing, because that happened in reality. But then my counter argument was, well, if you're saying that I can't compare the Will Smith slap to Danni because it's real life, then you're also saying that real people who are real victims of domestic violence can't compare their experiences to Danni because it's real life. Oh, that didn't go over well, even though I was making a very valid point. Because of the fact that what you did was you dismissed my comparison because I was comparing reality to a TV show. But at the same time, you didn't realize that statement pretty much dismissed real victims of domestic violence from relating or comparing their experience to Danni because it happened in real life versus a TV show. Now, here's the thing. Bill Burr did a great clip, comedy sketch about domestic violence. And the thing was, he broke it down where we should be able to ask questions. It shouldn't be a matter of a man put his hands on a woman, he's a monster. Go back to Jonah, dude, straight up beast. I'm not denying that. He's scum. But the thing about it is, you should be able to ask questions. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to insert the audio from Bill Burr's clip. I might even do a little thing where I put his audio over the Danni and Jonah scene and pretty much break it down from there, because of the fact that it goes so well. His dialogue in relation to how the scene broke down really says it all. And like I said before, it was messed up for Jonah to call Danni out of her name. It was messed up to put hands on her. But my thing is, what led to that point? Him calling her a bitch, obviously he was in his feelings about Danni. In his mind, Danni was a tease. Oh, you bring me home, we start going at it, in the bed, but then you cut me off after you make me horny, even though, apparently it must have been hard to tell if he was hard because he was short, apparently, according to Danni. But the thing was, it's the trigger of Danni going after his manhood. I'm not saying Danni shouldn't have or wasn't entitled to get one jab in after, being called out of her name. But like I said last week, she should have just took the L and let him go. Because of the fact that it wasn't that she took one jab at him, but it's the fact that she just kept on going. And like Bill Burr and a bunch of other comedians say, a woman will hit you where it hurts. Like, she'll think of the most mean, conniving, nasty, vile thing to hurt your feelings. But again, that's not to say that Jonah didn't do the same thing when he called her out of her name.
In their head, they just start concocting this evil statement. Totally designed, this desperate Hail Mary attempt to make you so fucking mad, you just call him a cunt.
Yeah, and it's like, and again, they say talk shit, get hit. And that's exactly what Danni did. You said Danni. Yes, she did talk that shit. But like it's been said, freedom of speech. You can actually say what you want. But you have to deal with the consequences for what happens next. Hell, even Cat Williams said you can't walk into a club, say fuck everybody in the club, and then walk out of the club and not expect somebody to come after you. Again, not saying Danni deserved to get slapped. I'm saying Danni running her mouth was the cause of her getting popped in the mouth, which is the effect. Cause and effect. There you go. Every action creates a different or opposite reaction. What they say in Hamilton, that song. That's the thing. I think what makes the Danni thing such a divisive subject is that there are those who just say straight up, you should never put hands on a woman. You should never do this. You should never do that. But I think Tyler wrote this in a weird way where Danni just did way too much by killing him. And I did a separate video. Killing is such a strong word in a Tyler Perry show because how many times have we seen characters who have walked away from scenarios where it's like they should be dead or they should be in a hospital bed for 3 seasons instead of 3 episodes. So I guess for the sake of this video, I'm going to just say Jonah's dead. I think it was too over the top, and as a result, it really dampens the lessons to be learned, which I mentioned earlier in this video. Beware of red flags. Be careful the company you keep. And don't, show your ass, literally or figuratively, to someone, without knowing how they react. Because, some people do run their mouths. I remember one time my old roommate back in Lynchburg, he had a way of just being overly, comedic to the point where not everything is a joke. Like, that's what she said, or, things like that. And then one time I remember he got back to the apartment, was like, man, I had a rough night. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Yeah, I was hanging out with some friends and, they were really stiff. Like, I said, a couple things and they were looking at me funny. And I was just like, yeah, that's one of them times where I really wish that I really can't be myself around certain people because I don't know them yet. So it's just like those memes, like, like Homer Simpson in the front seat smiling. It's like when you tell a joke that's so dirty and uncomfortable and the rest of the, group looks at you funny. That's kind of like how it is. Like, you really need to watch. You need to read the room. That's basically what I'm saying. So it's like, I know some people will be like, here you are pointing the finger at Danni for what happened. But the thing about it is the argument shifts gears because there are some people who talk about the fact that, well, Danni did what she did because she had to. She was almost raped. He almost killed her. But the thing is, in the court of law, there's a huge difference between almost and did. This man almost murdered me. This person did murder my sister. That kind of thing. You can say what you want. You can try to spin it. You can use your emotion. You can use your experiences. But that does not make up for the fact that Danni went too far when she killed that man. Because like I said, it would have been an entirely different argument if it was still in the midst of him trying to choke her and like she stabbed him or shot him. versus literally pursuing her attacker after he had already left her property. Because there are so many things, like, we don't know if there are cameras, on the outside of that apartment complex. There are so many things that will make Danni look bad because from the perspective of outsiders, she was the one that was assaulting him. She was the one chasing him, yelling at him, putting hands on him before he shoved her to the ground, grabbing the blunt object, wailing on him, busting the windows out of the car before going back to her car to run it into his. So that's not to say Jonah isn't trash. Again, I'm just saying from the perspective of, oh, if there are cameras outside, this is how it's going to look. Nobody knows what happened in Danni's apartment. Nobody knows that except for her and Jonah. And one of the two parties are dead. So that's the thing people really need to be aware of in terms of real life. Would you do it? Because I know some people in the Facebook group was like, all these people cheering for Danni for killing that guy, they wouldn't do it because they know they would go to jail. So that's the thing that just, is annoying to me. There are those who don't want to have the conversation or ask questions. They just want to say, men hitting women bad. No. But, I mean, it reminds me of the end of season 3. When Hayden slapped, didn't he slap or backhand Fatima in the face? And people were like, yo, no, he shouldn't have done that. But it's like, no, I mean, that was self-defense. Keep in mind, Fatima had nailed him in the face or jabbed him in the face like 2 to 4 times with the brass knuckles on. And then, during that assault, Hayden was like, hey, you better stop, Fatima. I ain't playing with you. But she kept doing it. So then he backhanded her, which led to her, whistling and calling the goons to beat him up. And for some reason, she thought that walking around going, oh, well, here's the, bruise from where Hayden hit me. And I'm like, what's that supposed to do, though? I'm like, how is that going to help your case when you're the one who assaulted him? Mind you, Hayden was trash because Fatima tried to do things peacefully. She calmly asked him to stop doing what he was doing, like coming after, her and Zach, but he refused. So just like Jonah, he just, ran his mouth. I mean, and then that led to, of course, her popping him in the face a few times, but he defended himself. And then another example, season 1, towards the end, when Jasmine was tossed off the roof of the parking garage, all the, verbal abuse that Gary had to endure from Jasmine before, because keep in mind, this man tried walking away multiple times. It wasn't until Jasmine taunted him about his mother's death and started pouring her urn into the gas tank of his car before setting on fire, that led to, Gary like grabbing her, trying to stop her, which then resulted in her grabbing a baseball bat, wailing on him the same way Danni was wailing on Jonah with that pipe. He managed to grab the end of the bat and backhanded Jasmine. And in that case, I'm like, straight up self-defense. Straight up self-defense. So when it comes to the Danni situation, the self-defense went out the door the moment Jonah walked away. And I think what's really causing women to have, the women who have strong feelings towards this scene, they look at it like Danni was fighting back because she was threatened. She was almost this, she was almost that. But like I said earlier, almost and did are two very different words, So I feel like, Danni fighting back was for being called out of her name. Danni fighting back was for having her life threatened. Being threatened and having your life being threatened and your life being taken away are two different things. Hell, one person on Twitter even went so far as to say, oh, so what did you expect Danni to do? Just lay on the floor and cry and wait for the police to show up? That would have been the smarter thing to do than what she did, because of the fact that now she's the one who's looking bad. Like I said earlier, it's the fact that based on outside eyes, depending on if there are some, if there were some cameras outside, Danni would have looked like the aggressor, you know? So I do feel like using emotion, and look, I get it. She snapped. None of us can truly say what we would do in that situation. It's just a matter of how the situation should have been handled by both parties, even from the get-go, from the initial date to when they first got back to Danny's, to the way both of them reacted to the bad sex and the way, you know, it was said. And then some people, and look, verbal abuse is a thing, but it's one thing to go that, well, yeah, Jonah was abusing her by calling her out of her name. I mean, yeah, but you can say two things are abuse, but there's a difference, but there can be differences, like physical, mental, emotional, verbal abuse are all different. That's not to say they can't be connected, but I think there's a major difference between Jonah calling Danni the B word versus popping her in the mouth. So could we say that one is worse than the other? That's the thing. Again, not to just sound like a broken record with the Bill Burr, but I think that's what people need to be more open to, having these discussions. I am not a woman, obviously. But the thing about it is, I think that these conversations need to be had if the message that Tyler is trying to present. Honestly, I wish I could like talk to the man just to get his opinion on things, because I really would like to know, sorry about my chair here. I would really like to know the thought process on why he decided to escalate things to the level that he did with Danni. It kind of reminds me of The Oval, where at the beginning of season 2, after Jason is confronted by his parents about murdering Jean and Denise, and then out of nowhere, he's like, you know why? You know why I turned out this way, me and Gail? Because his mom was like, what are you talking about? You gave us everything but love. And it's like, okay, Tyler, I get what you're doing here. The sentiment of, yeah, there are some messed up people out there, because you can give a child the world as they grow up, but if you don't give them time, attention, and love, then they can be pretty fucked up as adults. But if you can't try to make a character sympathetic after we've literally witnessed them sexually assault and kill people multiple times. Talking about Jason from The Oval. I think with the Danni thing, at worst, you know, the situation with, like, you know, Jonah slapping her and, you know, putting her to the ground and whatnot, that should have been it. But yeah, black people are like, no, we know Danni ain't going to just sit there and take that. But then when she decided to take things into her own hands, that's when things got worse. And like, I just feel like when it comes to the Danni situation, we should look at this thing from every angle, because of the fact that, like Andy said, you went outside, it's going to make things complicated. When Danni's in court, they're going to be asking all these questions. So what are you going to say if we get to that point in the show? Are you going to have that attitude with the characters the way y'all went at me? You know, like, it don't matter how you felt in the moment when something like that happened, being called out of your name or being, you know, abused. When you get in that courtroom and they break down things play by play, that shit's real. So that's the whole point. The fact that I think Danni took it too far. And I think Tyler took it too far with the writing, because now it's not really adding up, you know, from, okay, if Danni really killed this dude, what happened after the fact? Did she just get out of her car, catch an Uber, and get the hell out of Dodge? Like, what happened the rest of the night? What happened that morning? What happened during the day? Andy had been blowing up her phone and still hadn't been able to contact her. Then out of nowhere, she appears at the law firm wearing an outfit similar to her airport uniform to ask for a lawyer. We know she's going to talk with Andy and possibly Fatima in her office. And then in a semi-comedic moment, it looks like the shade she's wearing to the law firm, she pokes the lenses out and she's going to pretend to be legal counsel to go to the back visiting room of the prison to see Sabrina with Andy, because remember, only legal counsel can go back there. So I don't know what Tyler's doing here with the tone, and hopefully they don't pull a fake out with the death. Now, some people have argued that, Danny was in her feelings and her emotions and rage, and when she came down from that moment, she like screamed. So it's possible she misread the situation. She possibly looked right at through her windshield into Jonah's car and saw him bloodied up, banged up, and unconscious. Because remember, that's one thing people need to keep in mind. Some people were like, yeah, he deserved to get hit by that pipe and whatnot, and he was probably going to do something else. No, he wasn't. He was leaving. And the thing about it was, Danny banged him up pretty bad with that pipe, because think of it this way. This dude struggled in a rush to get to his car, and from there, she proceeded to bust the windows out. So he probably had, I don't know, fiberglass or whatever the hell that, some car windows are made out of. He probably had shards of that covering him, possibly that cut him up. And remember, he's still reeling from those blows to the head and back. Basically, the body shots Danny, made with the pipe and whatnot. And like I said, listen now, I'm not trying to say I feel sorry for Jonah in that moment. I'm trying to break down, like, that's why dude wasn't able to just crank his car up and get the hell out of there. He was pretty, discombobulated, in a daze. He was not in a condition to drive at that given moment because he was so banged up. Now, that leads to, like, Danny going to get, with her keys to get her car and whatnot. And that led to a lot of people wondering, like, wait a minute, how did she get her car keys? Now, if you notice kind of the gap in time between when Jonah left the apartment, and Danny seemed to be in a rush to catch up with him. So I believe that she grabbed the car keys before she got up, or excuse me, after she had gotten up from the floor and went to go after Jonah. But like, yeah, it does seem a bit weird. Like, did she plan to run him over from the start or what? But yeah, she did have the car keys on her, so she grabbed them prior to leaving the apartment building. But I do think that people should realize Danny took it to another level. Like, yeah, it got crazy because, as soon as they left the apartment, Jonah was like, get away from me, whatever. But then she started shoving him. That led to him shoving her, falling to the ground. She grabbed that bat or whatever, started wailing on him, busting windows out, got in her car and did what she did. So let me just say, yeah, Tyler, I feel like this should have been one of those things where it should have been written differently. It shouldn't have gone so far as to the murder, because at this point it's like, yeah, right on, I am woman, hear me roar. That's right, women need to do this, attack the attackers. But when you look at things legally, she fucked up. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The question is, like, what's the next move for Danny? Like, how is she going to get out of this mess? Will Madam help her out? I even put out that tweet, like, it would be something if Fatima or Andy get Madam to help out, and her expensive fee will get waived because she'll be like, whoa, he did that shit to you, and then you killed him? Oh, hell no, you did what you had to do. I'm going to do this one for free. I could see that happening. But regardless, I think Danny took it too far. But at the same time, I can understand people like being like, yeah, that's what she did, what she had to do. But the thing is, if you quote unquote do what you got to do, you got to realize there are freaking consequences that come along with that. And I mean, what's the fallout from this? I mean, now you have Danny, possibly that crazy ex-wife, that rude drunk woman at the airport. What if she's going to come back? Maybe she has some stories to tell. Maybe, he was an abusive deadbeat. Well, an abusive husband, hence why they had a divorce. It wasn't just her attitude. Poor the son who, I think broke his leg at summer camp. Now he has a broken leg and a dead daddy. So, and again, this isn't me trying to sympathize with Jonah. No, it's talking about the fallout of what happened, So what do you think? Do you think Danni took it too far? I honestly think she did. And for those who disagree, explain in the comments, but don't be a dick about it. Like, for real, just let me know, like, why do you feel the way you feel? And let's have a real conversation, because I'm not opposed to opposing views. Hence, if everybody agreed with me on everything, there wouldn't be a need for this channel. I would just have I would have over 220,000 yes men and yes women who like, yep, Jeremy, you're right. Versus, you know what? I don't know. Anybody who like challenges my thoughts. It isn't a debate about who's being right. I mean, both of them were straight up in the wrong. Both of them for what they did. Danni for murdering this son of a bitch, and him for being just an asshole in general and a monster. But it just seems like people are focusing on the wrong thing here, at least in my opinion. It's the domestic violence is wrong, and that's a wrap. Kill the attackers. Versus, okay, but let's look at this scenario as a whole. Even before Jonah called her out of her name or slapped her. Be careful who you decide to let into your life, and most importantly, let into your home, to hopefully avoid scenarios like this. Like I said before, I know there are monsters who go after innocents who they don't even know, break into people's home and perform heinous acts of violence and sexual crime. But this isn't one of those scenarios. This is a scenario where, you know, Danni let the weasel into the chicken coop, and look what happened. So that's really all I got to say about it. Yeah, I think she went too far. Simple as that. You can disagree all you want to, but now Danni needs to face the consequences of what she did, and we'll go from there. So thanks so much for tuning in. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.